Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Elder Scrolls Spotlight, a podcast about roleplay and role-playing inside the Elder Scrolls Online MMORPG. My name is Mikey, and I'll be your friendly neighborhood commentator for the evening. On tonight's show, I was able to reach out to a Dunmer roleplayer. I was interested in learning about what makes a Dunmer attractive to RP for some people, as well as listen to this person's experiences in the past 3 years and see how her characters have progressed over time. I felt it appropriate to interview someone who plays a Hlaalu. If my memory is correct, House Hlaalu are the most open of the 5 houses due to their cosmopolitan trading policies. In fact, her main character is a cosmopolitan businessman who, in about a week or so at the time of this recording, will be venturing out to Somerset for trading opportunities. She first started out RPing on forums and chat rooms, and then she took the next logical step. I'm pretty sure I can be confident in saying that she has been hooked ever since. Ladies and gentlemen, Gangzygirl joins us for the conversation tonight. Welcome to the show. God help you.
I'm sure God has helped me many times.
Well, I'm glad he helps you. He doesn't help me, and it would be nice if he did. But that's besides the point. Thank you so much for coming on to the show. I sincerely appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me.
Let's just jump straight into it, shall we?
All right.
Where are you from? How old are you, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm from just outside Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, the United States, and I am currently 34 years old.
Okay. And how did you get into video games?
When I was little, we actually had an Atari system in our house. That's like about as old school as you can get, and we played a lot of games when I was a kid. And then, as time went on, we got a Nintendo system, and we had Duck Hunt and Super Mario and Legend of Zelda. We played all those games. Time goes by, you upgrade to a Dreamcast. Time goes by, you upgrade to a PS2, a PS3, and then you upgrade to computer games.
So you've been gaming ever since you were a kid?
Oh yeah, I've always played video games.
That's awesome. What is your favorite video game?
My favorite video game, excluding ESO, has to be the Legacy of Kain Blood Omen series. It was a vampire series that took place. It was actually 2 branches. There was Legacy of Kain and its sister product, Soul Reaver. That Blood Omen 2 is actually my very favorite video game.
If I remember correctly, Blood Omen was developed by Silicon Knights. And the reason I know that is because they also did a remastered version of Metal Gear, one of my favorite games, Metal Gear Solid. I don't know if you ever played that game or not.
I can't say I have.
Okay. Legacy of Kain, Blood Omen. Isn't that's like, when was that? That's like 96, I think, 97? No, 90.
The original one was like in the 90s. The later games were like in 2000. I think the last one came out in like 2008, which was Legacy of Kain Defiance.
Right. Whatever happened to that series as of late?
I don't know. I was hoping there would be a continuation, but I think the way it ended, I don't give any spoilers. They felt it was kind of like tied in a nice nutshell and left it kind of open-ended. Because if you've played the Legacy of Kain and Soul Reaver games, there's a lot of time travel and lore where, like, something happens and that impacts the past, or something from the past was actually like, so that they knew was coming because they saw about it in the future. So since there's like the time frame is so convoluted and mixed up, it's a very intricate line, and I guess they kind of figured if you put the pieces together, it kind of like combines the story into one full piece.
Is that what you like about Legacy of Kain, the fact that it's all a puzzle piece storyline?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of, like, the storylines where, like, they actually make you think, they actually make you have to pay attention, and they actually put a lot of like emphasis into the lore, the characters, and the the whole emotion of the story.
It sounds like you could be like a Christopher Nolan fan. His movies are usually overly convoluted.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite moment in Legacy of Kain?
I think my favorite moment in Legacy of Kain was actually in the Blood Omen 2 when Uma, she took, the stone to try and face, the main villain by herself, and she basically is there dying, and Kain finds her and takes it back, and she asks him to help her, and he says, tell me that you were wrong and I'm the only one who could stop him. She's like, you're right. And can you see me as your leader? Yes, I can see it now. Please help me. And then he says, okay, then you'll die knowing the truth. And he kills her.
Jesus.
Yeah, he basically then, as she dies, says, you could have been my queen, but now you've left me alone. And that was one of the very few moments you actually see Kain be severely emotional. And that really stood out to me.
Okay. Wow. That's I wasn't expecting that. I was expecting like, oh yeah, he's totally gonna save her because that's how good guys do. But no, I forgot.
Kain's not a good guy.
No, he's not. He's a vampire. He's a vampiric bastard, of course.
That's the thing you have to realize. You don't play a good guy in this game.
Okay. I think that there's been a certain influx of games where you don't play the good guy anymore. In fact, I believe there's this new vampire game that's actually come out where I don't really remember how the details are, but it's a vampire game where you play a London doctor who's just been turned into a vampire. And you can either abide by the Hippocratic Oath and choose to abstain from, taking victims, or you can give into your vampiric tendencies and get stronger as a vampire. So you can go through the entire game completely depowered and making it absolutely hard for yourself, or you can make things easy and just be evil. So it's an interesting dynamic that goes on there.
Yeah, I like those games where like basically you have a choice and what you do does have an impact. It's a lot of the reasons why I also like the Fallout series from Bethesda.
Okay. And then could you also say that extends into the Elder Scrolls series as well?
Absolutely.
What was your first Elder Scrolls game?
My very first Elder Scrolls game, believe it or not, was Skyrim. I had just gotten a PS3, and Skyrim had come out. My boyfriend at the time was playing it, and he said, "Oh, just play it for a little bit. You'll love it." And I played it for 5 minutes, and I became extremely addicted. And I bought it for myself. And once I played Skyrim, and I fell in love with it, I actually even had a pretty popular stream a little while. I went and I got Oblivion, and I played that, and I really liked that even more than Skyrim. And as I was getting into this series, I started writing my own stories based on my Dovahkiin's life. And by posting on a art site, I found there were other people like me who really appreciated the fandom. And a lot of them were female. That's how I met a bunch of my friends, like Slayer Serena, Heiwako Maki, and a few others. And we formed a friendship for years where we all shared our art, shared our stories about Elder Scrolls and our other interests. And that was around the time when ESO was about to be released, and we all got excited because this is the time where we could actually play together in the same circuit as our tune.
Sure. Well, that's the dream, right? When I spoke to Maximus, he said, "Yeah, it's playing Elder Scrolls with your friends. That's the ultimate dream." Except it didn't really pan out that way. Not in the beginning at first. But let's backtrack a little bit. This is the first time I'm hearing that somebody said that they like Oblivion over Skyrim. And the reason I say that is usually what I tend to notice is that it's the first Elder Scrolls game that ends up being a person's favorite. So what is it about Oblivion that you liked more than Skyrim?
Well, Skyrim was good, but a lot of the quests were just basic gradient quests. You go over, you find something, you bring it back. You go over, you find something, you bring it back. You can do the main quest line in like 5 minutes, pretty much. In Oblivion, even though the graphics were a little bit, they're a little bit mediocre compared to Skyrim, they really put a lot of heart and detail into the plot lines, into the character, into the text, and the things you did actually did matter. So I love the fact that that I felt so much more immersed into the world with Oblivion and what I did and how my character evolved even more so than I did in Skyrim.
It's interesting that you say that because Oblivion has I would argue, a more generic setting than Skyrim. To me, Oblivion is a little bit more Lord of the Rings generic fantasy sort of thing, whereas Skyrim was much more distinct and albeit Norse inspired. What's your favorite quest line? Let's go down that route. Let's go with Oblivion first. What is your favorite quest line for Oblivion?
Actually, it's the same one as in Skyrim, the Dark Brotherhood storyline.
Oh, okay. So you're a Dark Brotherhood fangirl?
Absolutely. It's actually funny. When I was streaming, when I did the Dark Brotherhood quest line, I didn't really pay that close attention. I know I'd like summoning the Spectral Assassin, but since I didn't know he had a name, I just started calling him Buddy, and I'd be streaming and I'd be calling him Buddy. You're like, why are you calling Lucian that? I'm like, who the hell is Lucian? And then I played Oblivion. I'm like, oh, that's Lucian.
That's funny. Okay. Have you gone back and played any of the other Elder Scrolls games like Morrowind or Daggerfall?
No, I haven't played Morrowind or Daggerfall. You know what? I saw some gameplay of that, but the gameplay looked a little bit, complicated and the graphics a little crude for my liking. But I know that a lot of people will probably hate me for this, for not wanting to play Morrowind. But I can't. But that being, I'm not going to say I don't appreciate it. I appreciate the lore behind Morrowind. I appreciate the story and the details they put into the game when they had it. It's just not the kind of game I think I would have fun trying to play. But I can absolutely appreciate, the design in the gameplay as far as it goes.
Sure. Speaking of Morrowind's lore, this is just a tangent question, but what's your opinion of Mr. Kirkbride, considering that you're also a Dunmer role player?
I think he's a little nuts, to be honest. He's out there. I take him with a grain of salt, but if nothing else, he provides some amusement in our lives.
I agree with you in that sentiment. I've said before, Mr. Kirkbride he's a weird dude for sure. I do think he has made some important contributions to the lore. Make no mistake about that. But oh man, just I wonder how many joints you got to smoke to come up with, hey dude, giant bugs, and these dark elves ride them.
All I know is that I was in a sermon one point on Vitalis, and I got a whisper from someone called Kirkbride that said, "Beware, a Queen Iran is about to take off on her spaceship to the moon."
What?
That was my reaction. I'm like, I whispered to Rob, I'm like, what is going on? She's like, it's Kirkbride, just ignore him.
Is this? I wonder if it was seriously
No,
Kirkbride.
it was not Kirkbride. It was some player who had the character named Kirkbride.
Interesting.
It was so interesting.
He's doing well for himself, actually. He did work on those Batman Telltale games, which I thought was an interesting shift for him as far as career is concerned. But that's neither here nor there. Let's talk about your RP experiences, because we spoke before that you first started out in, well, which came first, chat rooms or forums?
Forums came first. I was really in a chat room, so we would actually have this forum, and we just I would post something, and then they would do a reply in a post, and it was kind of getting crazy because, how every time you post something, it goes off to the left a little bit, and we'd have these parts where it would go for miles down to the right. We're like, maybe we should start a new thread.
Jesus, wow! And what were these forums? Are they still around?
No, these were. I don't even know if I still have links to them. They were some of these basic normal chat room forums. They were used they were basics. You just basically can make replies, you can make comments, you can change the color of your font. That was pretty much it.
And what did you guys start out RPing there?
It was mostly vampire and werewolves fantasy settings. I was really into playing fantasy creatures. I was a big fan of vampires.
Did that extend into your RP as of late or as of ESO?
I have a vampire tomb, but I don't really roleplay him that much. Mostly because the role-playing communities, especially in the world of ESO, vampires are not exactly, accepted. So the vampire I have, he's a mercenary, but he keeps his condition discreet, so he appears every once in a while. But I wanted to be a part where I can be go to open communities. I could go to different events without that fear. So I would I don't really play vampires. I would play characters. But Vitalis my main tune did at one point endure a bit of lycanthropy that became public.
Okay. I have to applaud you for the way you handle the vampirism bit. I've always been of the belief that, if you are a vampire, there should be an element of fear involved, because it's if you're not careful, they'll come after you with pitchforks and torches, and I don't care how powerful you are, you're not going to be able to withstand an entire mob.
especially when most of the people you roleplay with are from are Dunmer and Morrowind, and so when you play a character who's a vampire and you're going to dealing with these people, you better make sure they're either a freaking Telvanni or you make sure you don't give anything away that might endanger your life. I don't understand these people who say like, oh, I'm a vampire, but I'm a good vampire. I'm like, there's no such thing in the Dunmer community. Just be smart.
You're preaching to the choir. Believe me, you are preaching to damn choir. But let's not get hung on that subject. Excuse me. Let's move on to how you came across Elder Scrolls Online. You were making stories. You found a group of friends, and you all found out that Elder Scrolls Online was being developed. What was your first reaction to that?
Well, I actually had been pretty like I tried World of Warcraft, and at that time I was kind of like like why would anyone want to play a game where you had to pay for it every month? Why can't you just buy it once and then you have the game? So I was kind of like on the fence about MMOs. And I got a little bit of like heat from that when I started being excited about Elder Scrolls Online. It's like, well, you said you hated MMOs, you never play one. I'm like, well, but this is Elder Scrolls, and I get to play with you guys. So um I was excited, but I got a little flack. But I had to I had gone in there a little bit skeptical because the whole pay at the time you had to pay every month for ESO. But a couple of them had gotten a chance to be in the beta, but they couldn't tell us anything about it, which was annoying. But then I actually got a key and was invited to take part in the beta as well. And when I got in, I was actually very surprised at how much it felt like the Skyrim game and how immersive it was. I mean, there was plenty of bugs because it was the beta version, but it was pretty cool.
Okay. What did you create when you first started the beta?
Well, every Elder Scrolls game I played, I always make an Argonian whose last name is Gangzygirl. So I made myself an Argonian Templar, and I explored the realm in that.
An Argonian? Really?
Argonians are my favorite races.
Even though you play a Dunmer?
Yeah.
That's interesting. So do you have an Argonian character then that you roleplay?
I did. There was when I was part of the Telvanni contracts, I had an Argonian named Knack, who was a jester, who also was a very skilled enchanter, and he was part of their guild for a little bit. So he was an Argonian I role played, but I don't really play him that much since I'm not in the guild anymore. So mostly the only two characters I play are Dunmer currently.
What is it about the Argonians that you like?
I always thought they were kind of cool. Like, they can breathe underwater. They have a dragon-like appearance to them. They have natural resistances. They overcame much. They're extremely dangerous. They're incredibly intelligent. I just thought they were a very interesting race to play.
In the fact that, they seem a little more, I guess next to Khajiit, not Khajiit, that's probably a terrible example, but they're probably the most out there race, which it's something I've always liked about Elder Scrolls when I think about it, that the races are all that diverse that it's almost impossible to believe that they all inhabit the same realm, if that makes sense.
It does.
So moving right along then, from the beta to the official release of the game, you told me that it was about a year before you got into actual Elder Scrolls Online roleplay. Why is this? How come there was like a year, I don't want to say delay, but like a year before it happened? I figured someone like you would have immediately found out that roleplay was the thing on Elder Scrolls Online.
Well, first, like I said, I mostly hung out with a bunch of the girls who I met on the forums, so we would play a lot together. And after we started the game a little bit, I did actually role play, but I only role played with my friend Slayer Serena. We had 4 main tunes that we just made this entire storyline regarding about. It was her 2 vampires, her Altmer and her Bosmer, Sindril and Saren, and there were my 2 tunes, my Argonian healer Jendar, and my little Bosmer Orin. And we just role played with each other. We made our own characters. We made our own stories, and we would go through the world and we do the quest line. In fact, we actually did the main storyline twice, and the way we made it more fun was we role played our way through it. But since we were role playing with our own tunes and we were doing our own thing, we didn't really pay attention to the other people around us or what else was happening. It wasn't until maybe about 4 or 5 months in when we were in Ebonheart that we noticed that other people were role playing, and we're like, what's going on? And we noticed that there were other people role players. And I was on Orin in Deshaw in Ebonheart, watching this thing going on between the Redoran soldiers. And at the time, most people will recognize his name, Ramus Samaras. He approached me and whispered, saying, "Hey, I recognize your tune," because my friend Serena had done an art piece of Cadwell with my little Bosmer Orin, and he recognized the tune. And it was there that Serena and I began discussing as we got an invitation to join the Morrowind role-playing community. And we thought, oh, this might be fun. And she's like, yeah, I always wanted to play a Dunmer Hlaalu. I'm like, do you want to make Hlaalu together? And she said, sure. And that's when she made Valmy and I made Vitalis.
Okay, that is quite the story, and there's a lot to unpack. So let's start with Ebonheart was a pretty big hub back in the day now, wasn't it?
Yeah, especially in the Dunmer Morrowind community. There was a small Argonian in the Shadowfen. There was a couple of children's Skyrim hubs going, but Dunmer Roleplay was clearly the real big popular hub with all the houses. The Indorals, the Redoran, the Drez, and there was always that one guild leader who everyone seemed to think had the biggest representation of the particular house. At the time, we chose to be Hlaalu because that's what we wanted to take part in. Hlaalu was not very popular at all. In fact, it was nearly non-existent. There was one Hlaalu house being led under Vec.
I've heard his name be mentioned a few times. Vec Hlaalu. Floyd mentioned him. I think also Maximus did as well. So what was it like then trying to essentially start out as the Hlaalu? I imagine it would have been an uphill battle considering that they were so underrepresented. Excuse me.
It was hard. I'm not gonna lie because, like I said, we had our little place in Narcissus, and we wanted to role play, but there was I think 5 of us in total who were playing Hlaalu at the time, and we just kept on finding excuses of reasons to go to Ebonheart or go somewhere so we could interact with other people because it was very, very boring. In fact, at one point, I was even considering leaving Hlaalu to become a Redoran, but I stuck through it, and I'm actually really glad I did because we were very small, but we stood together and we represented. And since there were so few of us, it was very easy for me to be able to rise up in the ranks in the house through my persistence and devotion to role playing my character.
So you guys were Narcissus where your character got your first IC start, or was it in Ebonheart?
We arrived in Ebonheart, and they directed us to Narcissus, where the Hlaalu house being led under Vec was located. We met with Ramus, and he said the Hlaalu house is in Narcissus. You can go there, and Vec can help, get you set up and as a guard in their house. And that's where we started. We started as guards in Narcissus. So Ebonheart was really basically, if there's a hub where people would congregate to roleplay with other people, it would be Ebonheart. But our location was for our house was in Narcissus.
It's interesting that you say that because nowadays it seems like it's shifted over to the Withered Tree in Riften, which I've always pondered how that is. But I didn't really get my RP start till in ESO till 2016, so it's kind of hard for me to imagine what it was like back before homesteads came in, and I guess the twilight of not the twilight, but the beginning of the onset of one Tamriel was just about to happen. I guess around that period of time. What was it like back then?
Well, obviously there was a lot more competition because you would try and find a place to be your character, your house's place of business. And since it's an open world MMO, there's always going to be questers, or there's going to be other people. And sometimes people can become very territorial. Like they'll be role playing there, and suddenly someone will be there. They're like, "Please, hey, we're trying to do a scene here. Would you mind just stepping to the side, or going to whispers?" So it was a little bit more competitive. There were a couple of moments I think where people became extremely territorial, but but there also the community was a lot bigger back then. I believe I certainly remember there being a lot more active players.
You think the community was a lot more bigger?
Well, it's bigger in that because of the introduction of Homestead, and that people don't have to fight for public houses anymore. They can role play in their own little manors or their houses, so you don't see them as often as you do. Like you would go to the withered tree, or you go to Ebonheart and you see like Redoran marching, or you see the Interrolls like hanging out in front of their temple, and now they'll have like their chateaus and their like little houses that they can roleplay in and have their immersive houses. So you don't see them as often, so the community feels smaller.
In that case, I would go ahead and come to the conclusion that it's not as concentrated as it once was, considering that there are more potential places to roleplay, considering that with the introduction of homesteads. So I guess it kind of fragmented in a way. But if I take a look at, say, the introduction forums, or, the official forums of, on the Elder Scrolls Online, I still see new folks always looking around, trying to get in on the role play, and it's interesting because, in my opinion, anyway, the ESORP community has been certainly more welcoming than others. So when you say that, I think that it's like, oh, is it really like that? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if I'm making sense or not. I don't think I am. How do I word this?
Well, I understand it. It probably isn't. It just felt that way to me because it's I was so used to, when I first came here, just be able to go to a public city or someplace, and I would see a bunch of other people, and I would meet new players in the tavern or in front of the kin house, and now it's pretty hard to find them.
Right, people were always out there rather than having retreated back to their homesteads for who knows what. I think I can.
Public roleplay is a lot harder to find.
Yeah, I would agree with that sentiment. Yeah, I would say barring the tavern roleplay, or perhaps the social event roleplay, such as a ball, or I don't know what's I guess the sermons as well, that they do hold the weekly sermons. Then you also had the Daggerfall Covenant Tavern night. I believe that's still going on. Or actually, I'm not sure if that's still going on. I should look into that. But that's besides the point. Barring those events, you don't really see public RPers nowadays. I did see you though yesterday. You guys were a bunch of you were RPing in East March, which was interesting to see.
Yeah, as I said, the Goldies were having an event, so that's why we were out there in the public.
I'm glad that still happens every now and again. I think that although it is a bit difficult because you do deal with trolls and griefers, but yeah, I still think that having events out there in the open world is important, because it is the world that we got, and it's the world that we have to use our imagination in. But let's move on to the meat and potatoes of this podcast, and that is your characters. We'll start with the one you've already mentioned, Vitalis. Where does Vitalis come from? What's his story?
Vitalis came from a very small Hlaalu house just a couple miles outside of Vivek City. They had a plantation. It was basically him, his parents, his aunts and uncles, and his cousins. And they would they would grow like crops. They would raise niches for their hides. And that's how they got their start. Vitalis, he always had a bit of he always had a taste for adventure. So his father would take him out hunting, and he learned how to hunt. He learned how to, butcher and tan his own game. And that's how he would, when he was young, how he would just get his first taste of being a merchant. He would go to the markets of Vivek City and try and sell his hide, or try and sell some of his meat. And after a couple of years, Vitalis grew a little bit older, and their older cousin, left for the mainland and never came back. So him and his younger cousin Valmy left their home and crossed over to Stonefalls to try and find their cousin. It turned out that he actually had joined the ordination in Ebonheart, but once there, they spoke to a couple of members of the Redoran, and they suggested that we go to Narcissus, and that's where Vitalis began to make his rise in the Hlaalu house there, working his way as a guard, proving himself through helping them try and discover the wicked dragon who has been threatening members of the different houses, where he got promoted to commander of the guard. keeping on working, and despite all the hazards and grief caused by the Ashland Er War, sticking through it and getting promoted to becoming an officer. And it was just this didn't take place over a short period of time. It was years of me being consistent in role playing to bring Vitalis up to where he is now, where he became the named patriarch of House and Thyron, which was Yazir's house. Yeah, after Vec lost his place, lost his all of his his titles and his land after the Ashlander War, Yazir took over as a Hlaalu house with her and Thyron. And when Jolly decided she was getting a little, got a new job, she decided to step down and let me take over. And Vitalis became the new head of House and Thyron, as well as our trading company, which is the Ebonheart Exchange.
So you touched upon a popular subject that has appeared both on the RPMMO radio podcast, lovely folks over there, and as well as this podcast as well. We talked about it with you and Floyd and also Maximus, and we'll also talk about it with you, the Ashland Er War. What was your role in it? How did it first come to you? You said that you were on both sides, so let's start with that.
Well, I only had Vitalis at the time, so I started with the Hlaalu. But the interesting thing was, Serena and I, we had joined the community just as the Ashlander War was starting and the plot was beginning to unfold. And Vec had formed an agreement with the Ashlander tribe. I can't remember. Oh gosh, I can't remember the name of the tribe. But they formed an agreement where if in exchange for them, trading their wares with the Hlaalu, they would offer them protection. So when the whole plot of the false Neverine in this Ashlander tribe came about, the Hlaalu actually stood between all the Indorol and Redoran and Drez and the Ashlanders to protect them when they so they could not get hurt or arrested. And after that, there was a lot of tension because Vitalis was very impressionable, so he went to Vec, and Vec was telling him not everything is black and white. There's two sides of a story. You can't believe the lies that are being said to you. So Vitalis went into this with a sympathetic view to the Ashlanders. In fact, he actually, behind the scenes, was befriending a player, an Ashlander named Han Lu, who was the false Neverine. And they formed a friendship, and they actually liked each other. And, Vitalis was starting to see this whole Ashlander War in a different set of eyes. And, he wasn't liking what he saw from his fellow Housemer. But since our Hlaalu weren't really antagonistic, and we weren't fighting, we weren't getting into the battles, it was pretty boring. My friend Serena had joined the Ashlander Guild and made an Ashlander, and I thought, well, that certainly sounds more interesting and more interactive than being a Hlaalu. So since we were best friends, we decided to make a pair of identical twins, and we played the Zahuulu twins during the Ashlander War.
Okay, and what are the Zahuulu twins' story from there?
Well, our story was we knew we wanted to play villains because our characters are so good or so nice. We decided we wanted to play extremely xenophobic, extremely violent, and very short-tempered Ashlanders. So we would have our characters fighting with each other. We would fight with the other Ashlanders. We would fight with anyone got in our way. We would be in the middle of a battle, and then we start screaming at each other and smacking each other in the face, because just leaving the house where dumbfounded.
So volatile opposites to what you guys usually do.
Yeah, Hasiran, my tune, was well-spoken, very creative, and very intelligent. And her tune, Asheron, was extremely strong, but very dim-witted, very impulsive, and he spoke with kind of a southern twang. Basically, the only way you could tell these two apart was when they spoke.
So someone had the southern twang, then it was Serena's character, and then if someone was well-spoken, then that would be your Ashlander character.
Right.
That's interesting. Okay. How were you guys able to nail down the twins aspect? Did you send each other screenshots of the types of report sliders that you used just to make sure everything was meticulous and perfect, or?
That's exactly how it is. I had Serena send me the stats to her. Since she made the Ashlander first, I had her send me the stats and the descriptions to make them as identical as possible, and it was actually pretty close.
What was off?
I think there was some parts of the muscle tone might have been a little off. But other than that, we were able to get the hairstyle, the height, the eye color, the body markings. That was not an issue.
I imagine that, delving into Ashlander roleplay might have been a new experience for you, considering that it feels to me anyway that Ashlander lore isn't really touched upon in the mainstream RP community, I would argue.
No, that's true. I actually, once I decided to become an Ashlander and join the role playing, I started doing research on Ashlander lore on the different sites because our tunes were followers of Boethia. So I did a bunch of research on Boethia, on the Ashlander tribe. I did a lot of studying on Morrowind and how the tribes were represented to try and play our characters. And that's one of the reasons why we decided to make our tunes extremely xenophobic, which made it interesting because some of the other Ashlanders, they were open to working with Imperials, working with Khajiit, and our characters were like, "What are you doing?"
Why are you trusting that pale-skinned Imperial? He's an
Pre-
Imperial.
Pretty much.
Why were they xenophobic?
Well, most Ashlander tribes, they tend to be out in the wild. They don't really see a lot of Outlanders, and the ones they do are usually trespass. From what we saw, the Ashlanders tend to just keep to themselves. In our particular tribe, our tribe were warriors. We were very territorial, and we just basically did not trust anything that wasn't gray skinned or we distrusted Housemer, we distrusted Outlanders, and it was just basically the only way to survive. We didn't want to trust anyone because we didn't know who we could trust.
That's understandable. That's understandable. That does lend an authentic credence to the xenophobia, in my opinion. Who else can you trust but your own? I think is the foundational logic, I would say, right?
Exactly.
How did the Ashlander War end for your Ashlander twins, and then how did it end for Vitalis? I'm curious to know.
Well, halfway through the Ashland Er War, the Hlaalu pulled out, and they actually pulled out of the war entirely. They were not going to get involved in it. They didn't agree with the ethics. They didn't agree with what was happening, and they wanted nothing to do with it. So we weren't involved in it at all. We didn't provide war materials. We didn't provide intel. We just stopped participating in it. So it was mostly just our Ashlanders that I took part in, and it ended with the battle on Ash Mountain with Hanlu being or the false Nephrim being thrown from the cliffside, and our Ashkan Zerubbabel, who's played by Nofreds, who was incredible. Him and Ramus Samaris, who was the quote unquote Hortator, in a battle to the death. And Ramus, Zeru stabbed Ramus in the throat, and Ramus kind of cut his head off, and they both ended up killing each other. That's how the war ended.
Sounds like one of those cool one-on-one duels that you see in like the movies or something.
It was from what I saw, the final battle was actually very much like a movie. It was pretty epic. There were well over 100 role players out there participating in this finale.
I also heard that it went on for more than one day as well. Like people had to take a day, had to break it off at the end of the day just to be like, okay, there's too much action here. We got to pick this up tomorrow or something of that nature. Is that true?
Yes, it was 3 days. The first day was them taking back Kraganmore and driving us to the Ash Mountains. The second day was them fighting their way up Ash Mountains, where we had a bunch of NPCs for them to fight. The third day was the final battle with our main Ashlanders taking on the Housemer.
Okay. So they fought actual NPCs like the.
Oh no, we made red shirts that weren't
Okay.
we would have our Ashlanders, but we don't want to have not all of us want to have our tunes PK'd right away. So we had little red shirts for them to fight on the way up.
Sure, sure. In fact, the happy consequence is that some people ended up keeping their Ashlander characters, and so I heard some people still RP them to this day.
Yeah, in fact, that's the thing with the Zahuulu twins. A thief ran Tangri Velothi, and until recently, we had been running Ashlander roleplay, and I had been playing Hasiran in that, but the roleplay was scarce, and I had to make room for another guild, so unfortunately, I had to leave Tangri Velothi. Would like to play him. It's just that I didn't really see a place for him because he's a very violent Ashlander, and he's a strong leader. He likes to protect his clan, but there really wasn't a lot of active, Ashlander role players there, and storylines weren't being created, so it was really not going anywhere, sadly.
That is unfortunate, but I think that, so long as there's always interest, there's always a way for Ashlander roleplay to continue to surface and for people to get that fix.
Oh yeah, my Ashlander Hazaron still exists, and if people need an antagonist in, more in Deshawn or Stonefalls, and they want a little scuffle, I'm always happy to bring Hazaron out to fight because he's so naturally aggressive that it's not hard to get him to attack anyone.
You mentioned that Vytalas Hlaalu lost his basically lost his titles and lands, I think is what you said, out in the aftermath of the Ashland War. What happened there? That's got to be disastrous consequences, I would imagine, for a character.
Yeah, I'm not sure. A lot of this was discussed OCly between a couple players, but basically Vec was being charged with heresy, along with assisting the Ashlanders during the war. So they arrested him and they put him on a trial for heresy, and they brought forth the evidence how Vitalis and Valmy stepped forward and intervened with an ordinator, arresting an Ashlander near Narcissus because the two had been ordered by Vec to not allow any harm to come to Ashlanders on the premises of the land. So they had Vec. Vec had that going against him, telling his kin to basically, intervene with ordinator business. But during the trial, unfortunately, there was no evidence that would pinpoint Vec being a heretic because he didn't have any items of any of the Daedra. He attended sermons, so they couldn't pin any heresy on him. But he did sell and do business with Ashlanders, which I guess is illegal. I don't know. It was the trial was quite a few years ago. I can't remember all the details, but as a result of this, he was not found guilty of heresy, but he was found guilty of dealing business with the Ashlanders. So he was stripped of his title of a Hlaalu, stripped of all of his property, and instructed to go and go on a pilgrimage in Vardenfell to seek forgiveness. And that was when basically Vec left the house of Hlaalu, and Yazvir stepped up and took over.
Okay. So let's talk about Vitalis's relationship to Yazvir, because I read here that she brought back the house back when it was, falling, became sort of a mentor figure to him. So what was that RP like? What was do you have any memorable experiences?
Oh yes, Jolly, even us to this day, are extremely close friends. She still plays Yazvir. Basically, I love playing a Hlaalu. I love being interactive. But I found my calling not really being a guard or doing anything militant involved. I was more into politics. I was more into being diplomatic. That was more my strong point. So I started assisting in being a representation, talking to the other houses, trying to find new contacts to do business with, setting up meetings. Basically, I followed under Yazvir as an officer, trying to help her keep everything together. She would set up some plot lines, us together as a guild. She would set up the establishment that is the Ebonheart Exchange. It was actually due to a lot of stress I see being put on us by the Tribunal Temple that we ended up going to Skyrim. I think I remember mentioning before that Vitalis was found cursed with lycanthropy.
Yeah, he did mention that.
Yeah, he. This was actually pretty funny. It was spur of the moment. I was in the Rift looking for an area to roleplay in, and an NPC werewolf attacked me. And next thing I know, I got cursed with lycanthropy. I'm like, oh well, crap! I didn't expect that to happen. You know what? I'm gonna roll with it. And so I decided to have Vitalis go to the Withered Tree and talk to his significant other at the time, who was Kelder, and discuss this. And next thing I know, I get a whisper from a friend of mine from the temple, and Jolly is saying, "The temple knows you're a werewolf." I'm like, how? Apparently, one of them was spying in the Withered Tree on me, and they heard the discussion. I'm like, oh, great. Oh, day one is a werewolf, and I was already exposed, and without even knowing.
Stressful, to say the least.
Yeah, but like I said, I was on pretty good terms with everyone in the community, and Sabaya particularly. So we talked, and she was actually really cool about it. But I made a point of working with it. Vitalis had this curse, and he stuck with it because it helped bring him closer to his partner Kelder. But he attended every sermon, praised the three, and was very devout, and didn't do anything to harm others. He basically continued to do what it was. And as a result, one night a horde of ordinators come into Narcissus, and they go in to arrest Vitalis for lycanthropy, because at the time Vitalis was serving as a member, a counselor of the Houses of Morrowind in the Grand Council. And they're like, okay, you can't be a werewolf and be a councilman. That's just not going to fly.
I can understand that, sure.
Yeah, so Oz was brought downstairs and interrogated about the whole lycanthropy issue. But I didn't know, and I didn't find out later, there was another character, Zakel. He was upstairs with Yasmir, and he basically was telling her, okay, we need to make a power political move, and I can do that by having you marry me. Either you agree to accept my proposal, or I'm going to have these ordinators go down and kill Vitalis.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a pretty cool move, I gotta say.
And she said basically, I'm going to call your bluff. And he said, okay, ordinator so-and-so, go down and cleanse Vitalis. And he started downstairs, and I don't know what was going to happen, but at the same time, Sabaya had called for the ordinator downstairs to bring Vitalis up. Basically, she went over and spoke to Vitalis and said that, you've shown that you still want to hold on to Amsavi, so we're going to put you through a series of tasks to cleanse you of this lycanthrope. But basically, once Yasmir saw Vitalis was okay and talked to Sabaya, she basically looked at Zakel, and she was not happy.
Okay. Poor Zakel.
Yeah, at the time, Vitalis had actually been disowned by his family, because since Vitalis was in love with an Outlander, a male Outlander of all things, because he found out about himself. His parents disowned him until he quote unquote provided an heir to the family name. But Yasmir had grown to adore Vitalis as her own, and she adopted him as her own son, and he took on the name Vitalis and Thyron. So Yasmir was very protective of Vitalis. She literally saw him as her own son. But it led to a series of interesting events with Zakel in particular. Vitalis had trusted Zakel as a member of the tribunal. He would go to him for advice. But on one of the pilgrimages when he was seeking to cure himself, I can't even make this up. A friend of mine and a couple other people, they're Stendars people. They were hunting werewolves, and they had just killed a pack of rogue ones. And we were on our pilgrimage, and we stopped, and they were talking. And without missing a beat, Zakel turns around and says, "Oh, really? Because we're here to try and help Vitalis, who has lycanthropy."
Uh-oh. That might have been a tense moment.
And Vitalis just slowly looked at Zakel, like, what the hell? And slowly, for the very first rest of his life, Vitalis learned the word hate. He hated Zakel. It led to a series of interesting events, especially since, down the line, Yasmir did end up marrying Zakel.
What is it about Zakel that would lead him to first, threaten to kill Vitalis, and then eventually be like, oh yeah, this dude, he's also a lycanthrope, wink, wink, nudge, nudge?
Well, when I silly asked about that, when Zakel came back and Vitalis confronted him, because he's like, Vitalis, why are you being so aggressive with me? He's like, why do you think? And Vitalis, and he said, well, that was a bluff at the time. It was all about politics. I wasn't really going to hurt you. And the second part with them, he says, well, at the time, I didn't think that they were going to do anything. Thankfully, they didn't. But that was the whole thing about talking about the werewolves in front of the werewolf hunters.
Wait, what? He didn't think the werewolf hunters were gonna do anything if
he said, well, we were with ordinators, you were with us, it would have been fine. Vitalis was not so sure.
Yeah, I wouldn't be so sure either. I would have been kind of skeptical. Like, really? I think they might have done something.
It was bad because Vitalis was working with the temple, and they would assure him that they would be discreet and to try and hold on to his reputation. Because Cal did that, the people in that group found out that Vitalis was a werewolf. They told other people. They told other people. And next thing Vitalis knew, everybody in the Mormon community knew he had been cursed with lycanthropy, which kind of tarnished his reputation.
I can only imagine.
Yeah, a couple members of the William Arbiters would not even talk to him anymore.
Okay. Did you ever get any whispers like, hey, my character is a so-and-so hunter. Would you be up for anything of that nature?
No, I didn't actually get any whispers regarding that because Vitalis was, by the time that happened, Vitalis was on the path to being cured. So it really wasn't an issue. But, and as I said, I get along with almost everyone in the community, so I would have been open for it. I'm not opposed to conflict roleplay. In fact, I love it. But it has to be, there has to be good communication and a lot of trust on both sides.
Sure. And I think that might be the biggest issue for some people. Anyway, for me personally, is that it's the trust issue. Are you doing it for the story, or can I trust that, you're doing it for the story, or are you just doing it for, the ego stroking? That's what, I want to know, that sort of thing. So that's the reason why I asked, because I would imagine that folks would immediately, someone of Vitalis is standing at that point being adopted as an Anthiran might have had a target on her back. How did let me ask you this, how did Yasvira take it when she found out that Vitalis was a werewolf?
Exceedingly well, considering she was one as well.
Oh. Well, okay. All right, I guess.
But she was a little disappointed in that he actually got caught. But honestly, that was not his fault. He was in the middle of the city of Riften, and it just happened, and he was not aware that the ordination had sent spies to follow him. Because I actually obviously didn't know that as well.
I guess, always look around to know who's listening in the tavern. That's what I would say. I don't know. But
yeah, that's what I started doing. Whenever I was role playing, if I was going to do something indiscretion, I either did it in whispers, or I would actually move somewhere else outside of where there's other people role playing.
Right. Okay. What about Valmy? Did he know?
Yeah, Valmy found out. Vitalis actually confessed his condition to Valmy a couple months before the ordination came in, and it broke his heart that it happened, because he basically thought since his cousin was cursed by Hircine, when the time came to be in Ash, they wouldn't see each other anymore.
Right. Okay.
So when he found out that Vitalis was to be cured, he was like all happy and go lucky, and he was like so cheery, and Vitalis was miserable.
Miserable for what reason?
Well, because the reason he decided to be a werewolf was because his mate at the time, Kelder, was a werewolf as well, and it brought them closer together.
Right. And with that cut off, then there was no longer that connection, I suppose.
And if either of them died, they would not see each other with them being cured. If they died and they were still together, they wouldn't see each other anymore in the afterlife.
Right. Okay, I can understand that from a cosmic standpoint. Sure. Let's get into the relationship between Valmy and Vitalis. You wrote here that they were cousins. So they seem to be cousins in name, but brothers in action.
Yeah, Vitalis didn't have any siblings growing up, so Valmy growing up, he basically came like a younger brother to him. So they did everything together. They played together. They studied together. They did their chores together. They were like really good friends.
Okay. How were you guys able to really illustrate that bond? because it's kind of hard to do when I think about it. Like, in order to assume that brotherly bond or familial bond, you do need a bit of history, I would imagine, which I guess you don't really have the time for, considering that you have to build off of years and years of prior RP. Does that make sense? Have I lost you at any point?
No, it was actually easy because, as I remember, the first year when we were playing ESO, Serena and I were the ones who were role playing with each other. So we actually had been role playing our own little personal storyline for about 6 months. So we knew the way the other role played. We knew how the other thought. We knew what each one was comfortable and not comfortable with. So since we had such a good read on each other, and since we were such good friends, it was fairly easy. We would we would brainstorm ideas of their past, like, okay, where did they come from? What was the relationship? Well, what did they do growing up? What are their personalities like? And since we had such an understanding of each other's limits and trusts, we could just randomly say, do you remember the time I did this when we were kids? And we would just play. We could totally play off on that because we trusted each other not to create something that was too far fetched.
Right, right. And I guess that really stems from the fact that you guys, as you said, had an immense trust between each other. What sort of advice would you give to anybody who was looking to try and have that sort of familial RP? Because I've seen people attempt it before, but it never ends up being long lasting. You know what I mean?
You have to form a friendship out of character before you can make one in character. You need to find out this person, friend them on Discord or Skype, talk to them, get to know a bit about them, chat a bit, do a couple of dungeons together. Just become friends OC first. And once you talk to each other for a little bit, you get a read of their personality and what they like and what they don't like and what they are and aren't comfortable with. And from there, you can discuss an idea, and there you can start brainstorming. And after that, once you start brainstorming, you can pinpoint a character or characters that you want to create together. And working together, you form something that you both agree on and can work together with. Because if you have a friendship first and foremost, you know you can trust each other. You know you like this person. You know you want to do things with this person, and that makes it much easier to not only have a good healthy role play, but also a consistent role play.
Okay, okay. That's sound words of advice that I think ought to be tacked down onto like a stone tablet and raised upon from Red Mountain or something, just to make sure people get it, which is awesome. Let's move on to Vitalis's, shall we say, love life, because it seems that he's had a few lovers here and there.
Hmm.
Let's talk about it from an OOC perspective. Um, how has that been for you, RPing that? I mean, yeah, how's that been for you, RPing, going through a few different um, character partners? I don't know
It
if I worded that
it
correct.
actually is kind of sad because like I said before, when you go into a relationship, you first become friends with someone. You talk to them OCally, you get to know them, you get to know the person, you like them, you genuinely want to spend time with them, and you become really, really good friends with them. And well, the only relationship that actually ended icily was with Kelder. Um, so I tried to hold a friendship with that. The relationships after that, I added it wasn't a while because with Kelder, I put so much emphasis into Vitalis's infatuation love with him, like his werewolf imprinted on Kelder's. So losing Kelder was detrimental and unhealthy in so many ways that Vitalis went to this huge series of depression where he just barely ate anything. He started drinking a lot more. He was basically losing all his focus on what he's supposed to do. But the other relationships, there was for a time there was a player who was Arla who played a Bosmer, and I became friends with them. I enjoyed their company. We talked a lot, and then just one day out of the blue, they just left the game without a word.
So you got ghosted. I hate it when that happens. It's
And the last one, I think had the biggest sting for me, which was Damien. Um, Damien came back after a while. I remember him playing a character during the whole series with the dragon. He played a Dunmer, And he came back and he remembered my character Vitalis. And we started talking to each other in whispers. And we friended and we started talking a bit more. We talked on Discord. We caught up with each other, and we actually found out we want to be friends. So we made it so our characters met each other at the withered tree, and they started talking. And this was one of the times I think you put the whole emphasis into building a relationship. We literally spent, I believe, 7 months OOCly building a friendship between these two characters. Like, that was literally not 6 months in game, 6 months OOCly in real life, building a friendship until Vitalis felt he could trust him enough to start, dating him. And from there, we spent about, I want to say, 8 months dating. And then suddenly out of nowhere, Damien vanished in the middle of my plot line with House Seloth that I created. He vanished. He didn't respond to me OCD. There was no contact at all, and he didn't show up again until 3 months later. Apparently, he had some computer and health issues, and we tried to mend the pieces of him coming back. We role played it out to the point where they actually became engaged, because we put 1.5 years into our RP for a relationship. And
Sure. You don't want to see that go down the toilet.
Yeah, we like literally spent almost every single day talking to each other on Discord, OOCly talking. We were legitimate friends. I cared about this guy. He was my friend. And then we were scheduled to be married in February. It was supposed to be a small ceremony. And then suddenly his ESO stopped working. He couldn't stay logged in for more than 10 minutes before a crash. So we tried role playing on the Discord for a while, and we postponed the wedding until he said it would probably be around May.
Mm-hmm.
And then about 4 months ago, once more he dropped contact, and before then he'd given me his info so I could text him in case I could reach him on the computer. And
right.
It's now been 4 months and I still have not heard back from him.
Dang it.
Yeah.
Dang it, Damien. What you doing, man? What you doing?
Yeah,
Ghosted like that. What's the matter with you? That's fucked up.
So that actually hurt me a lot, OOCly, because I don't care about the role play. I'm worried about him because, as I said, he had health problems, so I have no way of knowing if he's alive, if he's dead, if he's sick, if he's okay. And that just weighs heavily on me.
Sure.
And I don't go into role play relationships with my toons, without a thought. I put a lot of thought into it. If I'm gonna go into it, I go into it wholeheartedly, and I put a lot of focus and consideration into not only myself but the person on the other end of the other toon. It was kind of sad. I really miss the relationship role play. I miss the social interaction, and I missed having someone be able to accompany me to these events. About, I want to say, 2 weeks ago, Sabaya of House Interroll, she put together a meeting of the different hollow houses. There was Serethi, who has the Gold Leaf Acquisition, House Varen. There was me, Vytalas for House Thyron, and there was a new guild being led by a Hlaalu named Ina. And there was a few of the Hlaalu there, and one of them was a player named Brooke, who plays a little bookkeeper named Baron. And over time, we had a couple of interactions with Vitalis and them, just talking, and it turned out that they had a lot in common in far as what they were looking for in a relationship, what they wanted for their future, what they just wanted to be happy. And currently, Baron is Vitalis's, basically his partner. They're starting out slow. They're just having a nice romantic relationship, but I'm hoping it can grow from that.
Sure.
So, as I said, with anything I go into, I spend time with them OCly. We've been talking a lot on Discord, trying to work out times where we can advance our characters' growth. In fact, we discussed it, and we were going to have Baron come with Vitalis to Somerset.
What you said though does ring with me, because I always try to remind myself, especially on this program or even in RP, that there's always another person on the other side of the screen, and it's real easy to get disconnected from that, considering that all you're doing is interacting with pixels. As heartless as that sounds, at the end of the day, that's how I look at it. And I think that that lesson rings true for a lot of folks if they remember that, they're RPing with another person who, just like them, wants to have fun, albeit in their own way. And sometimes you can't help it if you get into conflict. Sometimes you can't help it if someone, goes inactive for a while or completely ghosts you. But at the end of the day, we can always be a little nicer to each other if we keep that small sentiment in mind.
That's one of the reasons why I try and friend them on Discord or TeamSpeak, and I actually talk to them, because that I want to emphasize. I want to remind that. I want to pinpoint the fact that there is a human being. It's one thing seeing text on the screen, but if you actually hear their voice, you hear their tone, you know that there's another human being you're talking to. There's someone on the other side, and you want them to be happy and you want to have fun, and because that's what everyone wants. That's why I think it's so important not to just jump into a relationship because, oh hey, I want to have a partner. I want to make sure you go into this that you're going to be compatible, that you want to go into this with the extent for this going for a while, and you go into this with a respect for the feelings and considerations of the person on the other side.
Sure. So I think that if we were to chalk up some advice for folks that are, have been dealing with a lot of, I guess, a revolving door when it comes to love interests in RP, which, in all fairness, whether you like it or you hate it, depending on how you look at it, it is a definite source of character growth. If we were to chalk up some golden advice, first and foremost, I think we could agree that communication outside of the game, be it Discord or Skype, is essential, because from there you're sort of extending the friendship boundary, I suppose, provided if they're open to it, that is. Some folks may not want, some folks may just like to keep it a completely icy, which is okay. That's completely understandable. But I do agree with you, by breaking down that extra barrier, hearing their voice, you do make it much more, I guess, personal, as weird as that sounds, for that person. And, from there you make the RP that much more enjoyable, because they become, I guess you could say, much more invested. Am I reading you right so far?
Yeah, like I said, it's so easy to just if you role play in a tavern, you talk to someone and then you dismiss it. When you actually spend the time to talk to someone, you hear their voice. I think it just it emphasizes them all more so that you're talking to a person and you're less likely to be callous. You're less likely to be dismissive. I've seen so many people who go into RP relationships and they basically have a new fling every 3 months, and I don't know. That works for some people. When I go into this, I really want something long lasting, because that's what my tune's looking for. He wants a partner to grow old with. He wants to see sunsets on the porch holding their hand. And Vitalis isn't the kind who can just go to a fling willy nilly. Maybe he'll maybe he'll do something maybe once to distress a little bit, but that's really not what he wants.
Do you think that it's possible to have a long-term RP relationship?
I know it's possible. Damien and I role played a building of a friendship for almost 2 years.
Until he, kind of poofed
Vanished.
on you. Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, that really impacted me, because that was a year and a half of me talking to him almost every single day, learning about him, just becoming his friend, and then not knowing what happened to him. It hurts.
Yeah, and I know I sound like a complete asshole and cynic when I say this, but I don't know. I can't say that I can believe in that. I don't think that it's possible for a character in role play to find another steady partner. I think the sentiment is noble, but looking at it from a cosmic standpoint, I just don't think it's realistic.
Actually, I disagree. Lemon Sugar and Saramaha, who plays Sarethi Varin in Nivius, who also knows Dane, they've been role playing a couple for 4 years.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and they actually have multiple tunes as couples, but Sarethi and Dane, they're the couple, and they have been having a realistic, beautiful relationship. They're really good friends. Sealy, they talk to each other all the time. They're like best friends. And Sealy, they have a true passionate relationship. You can tell when they role play and interact with each other that these tunes love each other and they care about each other, and that they are soulmates. So it is absolutely possible, and they are living proof.
Albeit very, very, very rare.
Yes, but they are proof that can happen.
They are proof, of course, of course. Huh. I suppose that's something I should talk to them about if I ever bring lemon sugar on the show. I've actually, it's like so. I've actually been told, like, yeah, you gotta get later.
Oh, Lemon has so many stories. She's an inspiration. She's like actually she's been one of the strongest community leaders. She did amazing work for the children of Skyrim. She leads a Gold Leaf acquisition, who my other twin Dinya is in, and that has over 100 members. The group there is organized. She works so hard to make a really fun and strong guild. I would recommend you get a chance to talk to her, because she has some amazing advice and some amazing stories.
And I would not doubt that. And let me say for the record that I do want to have a conversation with Lemon Sugar as well as the other community leaders that are out there. There are certainly a lot of them that are very prominent, always willing to help people out and always taking the reins of RP. Make no mistake that I want to talk to those folks. However, and I mean this respectfully to anyone that's listening or towards them as well, I don't want to talk to them right off the bat, because I want to also to be able to speak to the RPers that are also there on the ground that are not necessarily in the spotlight either, if that makes sense. It's kind of hard in doing that way, but it's more of, it's not I don't want, the last thing I want is to turn this show into a popularity contest. Does that make sense? So I don't want to just completely be talking to guild leaders only, or
That makes
people.
Sense.
Yeah. Anyway, hopefully those folks get the message. If not, then oh well, I tried. Whatever. But at the same time, that does assume a sort of arrogance with this show, which I hope it's not. That's not what I mean to do. It's not. I just simply say, out of respect, I do want to have conversations with them, just not yet. Yeah, I guess that's the best way I can put it. Oh
Yes.
well. Moving right along. One thing that I'm curious about Vitalis is his outlook on life. I said before that he's cosmopolitan, but I'm not exactly sure of the evidence that I have of this. Most of it is that, well, first of all, he lives in the cottage in Skyrim, which is interesting considering that, I would imagine most Dunmer, well, not most, but Morrowind-oriented Dunmer, like, ew, no, snow, no, Nords, no. So it's at the same time, he's had lovers of from different walks of life, as you mentioned, Keldor and Damien and the Bosmer, Arla. Yeah, right, Arla. So what is it about, or how did why is Vitalis cosmopolitan? How is he able to step out of his shoes? What makes him that way?
Well, I remember you said his teacher was Vec. Vec was always a very experimental, very open-eyed, unique, exploratory Dunmer. Thank you. He has seen a lot. He's been all across Tamriel. He's lived life. He's experienced greatest sorrows, the greatest happiness, the greatest pain. And when Vitalis went under his house, Vex started telling him these lessons and telling him how to see things not so black and white, not to see things as a house mirror, but just as, a living being.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's talked about, how being respectful to the other cultures and the beauty that, those outside of Tamriel can offer, and the, how working with these people can make you stronger and better. And that's why Vitalis has such a strong respect for the Outlander races, because he knows that they all have their different strengths and they can do things to make them better and stronger. And that's, as a Hlaalu are one of the few houses that accept Outlanders as, full members of their ranks. So that was they already are pretty, open-minded among the houses. But Vitalis kind of takes it in a degree. He refuses to use the word Enwa and is rather disgusted with people who use that word in front of him. He doesn't believe in slavery. He respects the other house's right to do it. That is their right as part of their culture. He does not personally practice it, and human slave trafficking is one of the few contracts he refuses to take part in his exchange company. He will do just about anything, but dealing with slavery, he will outright say no to and not have anything to do with.
Does this include skooma?
Yeah, Vitalis does not partake in skooma. He loves hookah. He does not do drugs.
No, I mean, does he sell skooma?
Oh God, no, he does not. He tries, if he does anything illegal, it's usually very, very discreet. Something along the lines of maybe purchasing Jaren root for a client who's looking to do something nefarious, but something like skooma, something that can be traced back to him, that's way too dangerous. He would not do anything involving skooma.
Okay. So he's not above doing illegal activities, but he's not going to go high risk, high rewards. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay, gotcha.
And he has so many legal and profitable contracts that something like skooma would not be worth the gamble to lose everything he's worked for.
Sure. And that's completely understandable from a practical point of view. And I think it's really unique of you to have Vitalis look at it from that angle when, it's quote unquote easy for other folks to be like, no, it's morally reprehensible, and the white knight and the skooma is bad, that sort of idea.
More so that he thinks it does more harm than good, and it's just basically, if he got caught dealing with this, it would ruin his entire reputation and that he's been working hard for, and it's just not worth the risk. If it was something really profitable and he thinks he can get away with it, he might consider it. But since it doesn't outweigh the risk, he doesn't take part in something like skooma. But he has done underhanded contracts before, as I said, with the Jaren route.
Okay, what is Jaren route, if you don't mind me asking? I don't know what that is.
I believe the Jaren route, people who play the game Skyrim, when you do the Dark Brotherhood questline, Jaren route is a very, very toxic route. It's a very potent route that a small fraction of its potency can take out an entire mammoth. It's extremely poisonous, and it was used as an ingredient to kill the Emperor in the Skyrim questline.
Wow, I did not know that. Okay. Oh,
spoiler
imagine.
Sorry.
Imagine what you would have if you had a whole ship full of that stuff. Oh man, that's that could be a WMD right there. Wow.
Yeah, Vitalis had a client who requested him to discreetly attain 3 samples of this plant, and he did so. But him and his people had to be extremely careful collecting it. One of his allies one of my allies in there failed to roll and scratched himself on one of the plants and almost died.
Yikes.
Yeah.
But then again, that's the name of the game. That's also a good point of character development when you have that brush of death on the job, I suppose.
I would have liked the idea of I have heard in lore the Hlaalu deal with people like the Kamanatong and the Mafia, but there just weren't enough people playing these types of people to really incorporate into the role play,
Yeah, it's totally understandable. The Kamanatong are an interesting group of folk that I hope to delve into more of, but their concept is really fascinating and almost out of place, in my opinion, when I look at Dunmer as a whole, because it's hard for me to really picture a sort of a cross between a Yakuza and the Mafia, because the Kamonotong, they're recognized to some degree, similar to the Morag Tong, right?
Well, they're more Moritong. They're illegal assassins. The Kamanatong, they're more the people who they like to do business, but they have a certain ideal to this is a pure Morrowind. And we will help you make this thing, but you have to accept our ideals. You have to meet our standards. We can make you rich, but you have to play by our rules.
Right. When you explain it like that, then yeah, it totally makes sense for Dunmer. Wow, how did I miss that? Let's move on to your second character, Dinya, which Dinya, sorry. Why did I say Dinya? Someone's in the kitchen with Dinya. Excuse me. So let's talk about Dinya. I wasn't able to read anything about her, so I'm gonna have to go in blind.
Sadly, a bunch of stuff I wrote for Dinya was on the Atheos website, and the owner of it completely destroyed the site and I lost all my writing because of it.
Oh no!
Yeah, so a lot of her backstory was lost due to that.
That's a bit disappointing. But okay, so tell me about Dinya. Is she related to the battle against House Saloth at all?
She is, exceedingly so. Dinya
So
is
let's do this. Why don't we talk about the battle against House Saloth first, and then we'll get into where Dinya comes in.
well, she's the reason there was a battle.
Okay, whichever one you think you want to start with, then up to
Well,
you.
as I told you before, Vitalis, he likes being with people. He's a very social creature, but he can get lonely. So after he lost Kelder, after he lost Arla, he got really depressed. And then one time this female Telvanni comes over to him, looking for some materials to contract him for, and they get to talking, and she says, "Well, my father's been pressuring me to, have a child to bring an heir to the house. You want a kid? How about we help each other out?"
Wow, that's okay.
I
Uh,
told you it's a complex storyline. Uh,
I'm sure it is.
so Dinya ended up having Vitalis got really, really, really drunk to go through with this, but they ended up having a son named Kadrin. And for the first 2 or 3 years of Kadrin's life, he was raised primarily by his father, Vitalis. And Dinya would show up every once in a while to, first she was with him for the most primary first 6 months of the child's life. But then, she had to go back to her tower, her research, her experimentation. She didn't want to be tied down. She basically thought that once she had this child and, the bloodline was continued, that was it. She does not think things through properly. But she is the daughter of a Telvanni magister who is Tarvin Seloth, very powerful, but also very, suspicious. He's very untrusting. He doesn't allow. He's very, specific of who he allows to be a part of his house. But she's also a daddy's girl. He adores Dinya. But for 3 years, Kadrian grew up with Vitalis, and around this time, I had never really done an extended storyline for my guild, and I thought, I've been coming up with this. I spent about a better part of about a year putting this together, and I decided to, what the heck, let's go for it. So Tarvin started visiting Vitalis's house to check in on Kadrin. It's a very long story, so I'm going to give you the Cliff Notes version of it.
Synopsis of a synopsis.
Yeah, basically, he was coming in to check to see if Kadrin, since Vitalis has no magical abilities, he wanted to make sure that Kadrin actually could, wield magic to see if he was something worthwhile to bring into House Seloth. Long story short, Kadrin was very arcane gifted. Tarvin came over, attacked Vitalis, almost killed him, abducted his son, and the Vitalis' people found Dinya and tortured her until they told him how to find her tower. At the time, Dinya was pregnant with one of Vitalis' officers' children, but only he knew that. And to make matters worse, he actually threatened to kill her unborn child if she didn't help them find her father.
Wow.
This plotline got really, really dark for Dinya. I won't bore you all the details. It was
I gotta say though, that officer.
Yeah, that officer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who is this officer, if you don't mind me asking?
I don't want to name because ideally no one knows. But the player, it was a very complex relationship. Like I said, it's such a long story. I explained the whole story to someone. It took about an hour and a half.
Well, okay,
But
let me just say this, Mr. Officer, if you're listening, congratulations, or Mr. or Mrs. whoever.
Mr.
Sir, if you're listening, hats off to you. That's pretty badass, I gotta say. I'm sorry, you were saying?
Yeah, so they ended up coming to the tower. They killed the Telvanni there, went to defend themselves. They were all killed, and then they went to face Tarvin. And in one final standoff, they killed him as well, which basically left Dinya homeless. She lost her family, she lost her house, she lost everything. She was pretty much lost, and Vitalis felt horrible about what happened. He didn't want it to end this way, but at the end of the day, he will do whatever it takes to get his son back, which he did. So he asked another Hlaalu house run by Atheos, who was run by a friend of mine at the time, Crow, if they would take Dinya in so that she wasn't on the streets. So they did, and for a while, it was actually, I was hoping oh, this would be a good place for her to grow, maybe learn to change, because she, in her Telvanni house, they had slaves. They saw Outlanders as lesser beings. She was fairly racist, and she was going to a Hlaalu house. Shenanigans ensue.
Yeah, I was waiting for that. Yeah. So
Yeah.
shenanigans.
Yeah, basically, she was trying very hard to fit in, but she would say something like, "Oh, so it was no slavery; it's just a fact of life." And she looks, she says next to the Argonian. So, and it didn't help that one of the officers, Isili, hated Telvanni and would constantly go out of his way to make her feel unwelcome. It was actually kind of sad. She was going through some real trauma because she literally lost everything: her family, her home, her life, and no one was talking to her. No one asked her if she was okay. No one asked her how she was doing. They would just leave her alone, and she tried to be strong, so she would not show weakness in front of them. She would go off by herself to release this pain, and since people weren't really talking to her, she would just sit at the edge of the fountain and just start talking to it, and they'd be like, "Oh, look at the Telvanni talking to the fountain. She's so quirky." No, she was going through a psychological issue and trying to deal with it any way she could, and that dealt with basically talking to an inanimate object.
So let me ask you this. I guess was it because they were mean that it kind of, well, I mean, I guess what stopped her from reaching out to talk to folks?
Well, as I said, she was a Telvanni who had a bunch of viewpoints that were not their own, and it's not like one of those things where you just snap a finger and, oh, okay, I can immediately just accept this is the new way of viewing things.
No, of course not.
Time,
Right.
so she there was a bunch of Outlanders that she didn't trust, and they didn't trust her. One of the officers was already didn't like her, and she knew this.
But I mean, my question is, what's stopping her from trying to meet someone halfway at least?
Well, I was getting to that. She wanted to. But she was also dealing with a lot. If you your entire family dies, you're not going to want to go out and make friends and have fun right away. It's going to take some time to overcome that.
Okay, that's
So
fair enough.
Slowly did. One of the house lord actually made a point to pair her up with a Khajiit, because he thought that might help her along the way, and it did. It was a Khajiit by the name of Zasha, and it was tense at first, but he was so kind to her. He would actually come up to her, make her feel welcome, make her feel wanted and appreciated. And that was the turning point when she started to see things that Outlanders are not slaves or not beast races. They're actually people who care. So very slowly she began to see that maybe the way she was living is not the way the proper way that people should live. She started being more open to Outlanders, and it was going well enough. She was in I think they wanted to call it probation before they would actually name her a member of the house. When she would say she was part of House Atheos, the officer would step in and say, "You're not one of us yet." He wouldn't even call her by her name. He actually called her Telvanni. But as things went on, it got a bit dark. It got to a point where she was. This took me by surprise. I did not see this coming. The house lord, who was married, by the way, approached her at one point and started talking to her, and she had trusted this guy because he actually saved her life. She was almost killed while she was being tortured, and he came in and was able to use his restoration abilities to save her. So she trusted him. He basically put moves on her and tried to convince her to have an affair with him.
Okay, that went 0 to 60 real fast.
Yeah, so keep in mind, she's pregnant at the time.
Right.
So her entire world just came crashing down, and she was not knowing where to go because there was basically the house where she didn't feel safe and didn't feel welcome, or the streets. Um, I remember me telling you about Sarethi, played by Lemon Sugar. Well, Sarethi came on as an advisor for House Athios for the merchant department, and he came in and spoke to Dinya a couple times, and he saw that she wanted to learn. She was so she used to be very strong. She could go up to strangers and like talk to them about random things because she was so quirky. But after everything she went through, she became a shell of her former self. She was very she didn't have a lot of self-confidence. She didn't trust her own instincts. So he actually offered to help her with some lessons to be a better public speaker, or to have an idea of how to handle yourself with confidence. And she went out of her way to the point where she would actually go to his compound in Craigloren, where the Gold Leaf Acquisition is located, their company, to seek advice from him. Further down the line, Dinya just didn't like where things were going with Athios, and she left the house and went to Sarethi because he had offered her a position as an apprentice if she was ever willing to learn more or try and want to grow. So since then, Dinya has joined the Gold Leaf Acquisition as a member of the specialist team, a healer, where she has learned first aid, a bunch of alchemy, and she's been using her destruction magic at times to help them in battles. But basically, this place has been a whole breath of fresh air for her. She feels challenged. She feels like she can grow, and she actually feels like she's a part of something. The one thing she really missed that wasn't given to Athios was there were people there, but there was not a connection. People were off doing their own things. Everyone was off doing their own solo project. And Dinya was raised in the house of Telvanni, where everyone was doing projects together, experiments together. There was always people around. With the Gold Leaf Acquisition, there were so many people around, and the teams were actually teams. They worked together, and they helped each other, and they pushed each other to become better. So she's been thriving, growing, and slowly healing.
And from there, hopefully, things will get better.
Yeah, she's actually had her daughter now. Her daughter's about 3 months old now, and she's made a lot of friends. She has a couple people she actually trusts, and it's going really well for her. I've actually been enjoying having her slowly heal from everything she's been through.
So let's look at all this from a cosmic standpoint. I say cosmic, I mean from like an outsider's perspective. If you had to step outside for a moment, looking at all the RP that you've been through, both on Vitalis and Dinya, and any of the other characters, which I'm sure you might have a few others, you might have RP'd on. Are you happy with the RP experiences that you've had so far, despite some of the things that may have gone wrong?
Well, yeah, because to be honest, it's a way. It's my distressor. I can step away from the reality and just go over to a world, and I can live another life, and be with and just chat and laugh in a voice chat with people who I consider friends. We can create these great stories together. We can accomplish great things together. And it's just there's, as I said, there's been a lot of harsh breakups and moments of sadness, but that's just part of the role playing thing. You experience things and you grow, just like in real life.
It's interesting that you say that it's a way for you to de-stress and come to a world where just basically relax and role play, because it sounds to me like a bit of an escapism, which I've always held that there's a there's a heart and soul and mentality to RP, which I've always labeled as escapism, imagination, and ego. So I don't know, I find that interesting. Moving right along that, I think we're all set to bring this conversation to a close. But before we do, is there anything else that you'd like to talk about, any subjects that you'd like to touch upon, or feel that we didn't delve into deep enough?
No, there was actually this is one of the few times I actually got to explain in great detail just what my character's gone through. It's not like people like they come in and they immediately say, "Okay, I'm the house lord of this house, and I'm a lord." I like the fact that when I first came to the community, I literally started as a guard, and it took a period of about 3 years of me role playing to work my way up to where I am now. I love the fact that things take time and effort, and I think that makes it all the more meaningful. Like everything that happens along the way. I think you learn a lot about lessons you learn through your character. I think actually you can apply to yourself. I think I've learned a lot to grow as a person through playing Vitalis. About like overcoming obstacles, not letting these hardships of life get you down, to brush yourself off and try again. And I've made some really wonderful friendships over the years here. Some of these people I've been friends with for 3 years or more. Ragnar I've known for about 4 years. Lemon and Dane I've known them for about 3 years. And Serena I've been friends for about 6. So it's just been really nice having this place where we can create stories with other people, and we learn to not only have fun together, but we actually care about each other as people.
Well, that's great, and I'm happy that you feel that way. With that being said, we're going to go ahead and draw this interview to a close. Thank you so much, Gangzy, for coming on and obliging my weird curiosity, and thank you so much for the conversation.
No problem. I had a nice time.
So, this 10-item questionnaire was first invented by Marcel Proust, then used by French TV show host Bernard Pivot, and finally used by James Lipton in the greatest series of all time, sort of, kind of, not really, Inside the Actor's Studio. 10-item questionnaire, and then you're done. I'll release you from your bonds. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Number one. What is your favorite word?
Kumquat.
What is your least favorite word?
Perfection.
What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
Colors.
What turns you off?
Stillness.
What is your favorite curse word?
Shit.
What sound or noise do you love?
Cats purring.
What sound or noise do you hate?
Bees buzzing.
What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Marine biology.
What profession would you not like to do? Never in a million years, they could not pay you enough to do it.
Outside construction.
And finally, for our last question, if heaven exists, if it does, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
We've been waiting for you. The Beatles are right over there performing their concert.
Ladies and gentlemen, that brings this episode to a close. Thank you so much for joining us. And Gangzygirl, thank you so much for talking to me about your character and the stuff that you like to do. I hope to have you again sometime in the future.
Well, thank you very much. I had a lovely time.
Bye-bye.